Some of you may be aware of the bit of a drama that's going on in Twitter with regards to me and the Christian Socialist community. My statement was that there's a blatant contradiction between an idealist ideology like religion and materialism, which is Marxism. I mean, there's a blatant contradiction there. Now, at no point did I say someone is not allowed to be religious and a Marxist, because I am. And that I'd be contradicting myself. It's certainly okay to believe in God and be a Marxist. It's another thing to force your ideology into Marxism, which is something that the socialist American patriots like to do. And all of them are rallying around Caleb Boppin's book, Jesus was a Socialist, which, whether or not that's true, is completely irrelevant to the fact that Christianity is an anti-materialist ideology. I mean, I could point out things like render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God, and that this isn't a green light to go ahead and force Christianity into Marxism and political ideology, because I think in all of human history we've seen what happens when you force religion into government. I'd also like to remind them that many of them are supporters of the Constitution because they think somehow the Constitution is a good document when it's not. It blatantly defends private property. There's also the part in there about the separation of church and state. When you make your religious ideology also your political ideology, and you're trying to force that onto society, you are violating the separation between church and state. So you kind of can't do that and believe in the Constitution at the same time. That's a blatant contradiction. Now, of course, rather than present reasonable arguments for why anti-materialism and materialism are somehow compatible, which you can't do, they just instead relentlessly attack. I mean, comments about my hair, my weight, my general appearance, calling me a joke, and some of them very unhinged and borderline psychotic behavior. Many of them including death threats against myself. So when I say Christianity and Marxism are not compatible because an anti-materialist ideology and a materialist ideology are not compatible, they threaten to kill you. I mean, Christianity has a very long history of threatening to kill people because they don't believe in their ideology. Well, I'm not going to apologize for not being Christian, and I'm not going to apologize for having left Christianity. I made a rightful choice, and one that I should be able to make. What's very interesting here is the same mentality of the Christian left that the Christian right has. If you say no religion in political ideology, all of a sudden they turn around and act like they're the victims. The Christian right will claim that this is a Christian nation and that taking Christianity out of it is a blasphemy and that Christ should be a part of the America, whatever. And these Christian leftists are actually doing the same thing. When you remind them that Christianity does not belong in Marxism, these should be two separate things which you can believe in, they act like you just shot their mother or something. Like, I don't know if people know this, but you can be religious and be a Marxist. You can be religious and not force your religion on other people through ideology. You know, like I do. My religion doesn't have to interfere with Marxist theory. I can do that. I can be religious and not force it on other people, or create a veiled way of doing it by supporting some kind of Christian Marxism, which doesn't make any sense. You can't have any religion Marxism because that doesn't make any sense. One is materialist, one is anti-materialist, a point that they all just keep ignoring, and then act like if I say religion doesn't belong in Marxism, they act like they're being persecuted. So the Christian right and the Christian left in America, and I would like to stress that this is 99% America, are acting the exact same way. What's similar between them is that they're both Christian, and Christians have a persecution complex. That it is not enough to have killed tens of millions of people in the name of their ideology, and people who didn't want to convert to their ideology, somehow they still feel like they're the victims. It's just wholly appropriate that they both feel and act the same way in this regard. Now, some of them have gone so far as to point out the Sandinistas, and they had this like Christian socialist thing. Except that's the exception, not the rule. And I'd also like to remind you that when you do that, when you push this Christian socialist thing, you're actually being very divisive, because you're telling everybody else who's a Marxist, who's either an atheist or another religion, that they're in the way. No, we're not saying they're in the way. You're just saying Christianity, Marxism is Christian. And then excluding everyone else, when it clearly has nothing to do with religion. One of the best ones was them trying to get me kicked off Press TV for not thinking that Christianity belongs in Marxism. Well, I got something for you. Press TV doesn't care. And I think it's rather pathetic and really symptomatic of the true fascist nature of this ideology, or totalitarian, whatever term you would like to use, that you're trying to get an anti-imperialist voice, or like myself, who's primarily anti-imperialism, that's the biggest thing I go on about, from an anti-imperialist media outpost like Press TV, because I don't accept your Jesus, or you trying to force him on people through Marxism. So you see that. You see the real Christian way here. The same reason evangelicals undermine anything that would help people, because it's not Christian. You're doing the exact same thing. I'm going to try to appeal to logic and human decency here. How effective that will be remains to be seen. It's very sad that all this has to be the way that it is, because it doesn't have to be this way. Now, one of the things that I find truly perplexing about this, saying, well, why do you support Iran then? Why do you support them and their theocracy? Well, guy with Israeli flag and his profile picture, Iran's not a theocracy. There's a great deal of religion in their society, but that does not make them a theocracy. Israel is a fascist, white supremacist, in my opinion, it's white supremacist state. Saudi Arabia is a theocratic state. Israel's a theocratic state, a very perverse version of, you couldn't even really call it Judaism. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with Israel and why it's a blatant contradiction with Judaism itself, but that's besides the point. What these people who are wailing, trying to get me canceled, and trying to make appeals to hypocrisy that don't make any sense, don't understand, is that Iran isn't running around claiming to be Marxist and then wedging Islam in it. That's my problem. You see, the persecution complex that you have reveals yourself again. My problem isn't with people being Christian. My problem is with people trying to force Christianity into Marxism. Okay, do you understand that? This isn't about your religion. This is about you trying to force your religion into a materialist political ideology. That's the problem here. Now, you can have this Christian socialism. You could have a socialism based on Christianity. But it wouldn't be Marxism, because Marxism is materialist. You could have a socialism based on Islam, also known as Jahamaria. and that is a form of socialism. It's not Marxism, but it is socialism. You cannot force an anti-materialist belief into a materialist ideology, despite all the very, very strange mental gymnastics that these people like to use. Like, oh, distribute to all of them upon those who had need, and then each according to their ability, to each according to their need. I know that doesn't resolve the blatant contradiction of materialism versus anti-materialism. You just found some kind of commonality. Also, I'm pretty sure that Marxism opposes murdering your children with stones because they disagreed with you or didn't do what you want them to. You know, if a child disobeys the parents, then you have to murder your children. I mean, there's a lot of things in the Bible there that these people just conveniently forget about. And in that, we once again see the very American Christian nature of it. The Christian right will ignore everything about charity. They'll ignore Acts 1 and 2, which are basically socialist texts, and just focus on the really hateful aspect of it. Well, then you turn around and this Christian left will do the same thing. They'll just completely ignore everything in the history of Christianity and in the Bible that is blatantly hateful, murderous, genocidal, slavery supporting, etc., and just focus on the parts that they do like. You see, that's the problem. If you acknowledge that the Bible is the Word of God, you kind of can't cherry pick it at that point, which is what both sides are doing. When the Christian right cherry picks in order to support capitalism, the Christian left cherry picks in order to support socialism. That's the problem with having an anti-materialist ideology and trying to wedge it into a materialist ideology. I hope this has adequately explained that. I mean, I know I'm just going to keep getting more death threats and insults on Twitter. But I've made a very rational, logical argument here why the two are incompatible. And I'd also appreciate it if you'd stop calling me an atheist, fedora person when I'm not an atheist. I mean, you kind of continue that same thing. If you're not Christian, you're some kind of heretic. Because when I say religion doesn't belong in socialism, it's not Jews attacking me. It's not Islam attacking me. Or Muslims attacking me. It's not Jews attacking me. It's Christians who are attacking me. When you sit down and think about that for a bit and realize that. Now, I hope that this has adequately explained the situation and that there are very blatant and real parallels between the Christian right and the Christian left. And maybe this will help some people understand that this way of behaving is very reactionary, not to mention very unsettling, that this is the way they choose to behave. You can be religious and still be a Marxist. I am. Castro was. He was a Seventh-day Adventist or something. I can't remember if Ho Chi Minh was. Either way, that's besides the point. You can be religious and be a Marxist. What you can't do is force your religion into Marxism. Because I would like to remind you that there are people in America who aren't Christian. And some who are just straight up atheist. In fact, all studies show that the youth are increasingly secular and rejecting religion. Some of them being X whatever religion in name only. And you're kind of alienating those people. Because the American people, or particularly progressives, liberals, etc., knows what happens. They know what happens when you force Christianity onto the government. You kind of get the Republican Party to a large degree. And that's not right. Religion really doesn't have any place in government. And I firmly believe that. So hopefully this clears that up, and maybe you'll stop sending me constant death threats for not agreeing with you forcing Christ onto other people using Marxism, because it's wholly appropriate that this battle of trying to force Christ onto people with Marxism is a first world phenomenon. And I shouldn't even really say first world phenomenon. I should say an American phenomenon. Because how Christian is that? I mean, how American is that to try to force Christianity onto people when that is the entire history of America? Either gunpoint conversions of Christianity to slaves, or genocide against native peoples for not being people of God. It's right there in your history, despite how many people would try to pretend that it never happened. If this is the best that Christianity can do, I feel sorry for it. Then maybe you should just stop being Marxist and just be Christians instead. Because Marxism isn't about forcing your religion on other people. It's about a materialist ideology leading the world towards liberation. And that liberation is not going to come through an unquestionable, supreme, supernatural being of which there is no evidence actually exists. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.